亲爱的观众朋友，大家好，欢迎收看本期的对话华尔街节目，我是陈子纯。本周一呢，中国的国务院总理李克强结束了对于瑞士、德国等国的国事访问。那么，作为新一届政府组成后首次到访欧洲的中国领导人，李克强总理此次短短的4天的欧洲之行引起了外界的密切关注。在德国的时候，李克强总理强调，中德可以组成世界经济梦之队。那么，德国在发展上也有很多经验值得中国来借鉴和学习。正好，我们的老朋友美女经济学家Sandra Navidi就是德国人，让我们来看一看本期的德国特别节目，来听一听Sandra Navidi对于中德关系有怎样独到的见解。Sandra Navidi， BeyondGlobal 公司 CEO， 前卢比尼全球研究院首席战略分析师，也是宏观经济专家。Hi Sandra, thank you very much for coming again to our interview.
Thank you for the invitation, Kevin.
First question is, do you really pay attention to the Chinese Prime Minister, Mr. Li, his visit to Europe, especially Germany? How would you evaluate it?
I think it was a very important sign for Germany. It made headlines because there's this great Goliath, China is coming to small Germany. I think it's very important because both countries belong to the world's largest exporting nations, and in view of the global financial crisis, it's very important for them to work together rather than against each other.
Great. And Prime Minister Li says China and Germany can be really economic dream teams together. And what's your take on that? Do you think it means that China would want to be partner with Germany in particular and avoiding the European Union?
I think they complement each other well. There is a lot of potential for a symbiotic relationship because right now in the short and medium term they don't necessarily compete against each other. China had a competitive advantage because of cheap labor. Germany had to be strong on innovation. They have brand products, high-end, sophisticated technical know-how that the Chinese are interested in, and Germany cannot compete on cheap labor, even though China is starting to move away from that. I think from the Chinese point of view, Germany is seen as a gate, an entry gate into Europe. Germany has the burden and the privilege to be one of the most powerful nations in Europe, if not the one. And so it needs to coordinate with other European nations. So I think for Germany, the coin has two sides. It needs to be careful. It can't take advantage of this special relationship too much to its own benefit. It needs to make sure that all of Europe benefits from it.
So in what areas, like you said, labor, what areas do you think China can provide like really powerful support to Germany?
Of most interest, greatest interest is China as an export market. China is huge. There's a lot of demand, whereas globally demand has been decreasing in the U.S., but also particularly in Europe. So, and even if China's growth slows, there's still an emerging middle class, and there's enough for potential for German products to be absorbed. In that respect, it's important, and also for German companies to gain entry into China. We have seen recently, first of all, they've been there for decades. They entered the Chinese market very early under difficult conditions, and right now, I mean, there's still great differences, even though the nations get along well, but there are differences in the legal system and the social system and in accounting standards, and so to make the conditions for German entry better, I think that's where China could help Germany.
Okay, we know Prime Minister Li also went to Switzerland during his trip to Europe, and there was a China-Switzerland free trade zone established at that time. And what does that mean, do you think? And do you think it's a beginning point that China is going to get more like influences to Europe?
I think China is trying to diversify itself and keeping all doors open. And Switzerland is a little bit like Germany in that it has a very, very strong export sector. One may not think so at first glance. One thinks of banks and expensive watches, but it's very diversified. And similar to Germany, it has high-end, expensive products that are, don't take as much labor, but very sophisticated kind of labor. They have brand products that the Chinese are eager to buy. And at the same token, Chinese can export their products that the Swiss don't produce into Switzerland. I think just on the whole, it's good that these free trade agreements exist in order to prevent a trade war.
While he was in Berlin, Prime Minister Li mentioned that the first quarter GDP increase in China, which is 7.7%, it's appropriate. And do you think that means that even China has lower than 7% GDP increase that is allowed in China?
I think to some extent it was kind of comforting to hear him say that, a realistic assessment of the situation. 7% is still solid growth. It's a lot less, so we do realize that it has implications on the Chinese population. But I think it's better to anticipate problems and to try to counteract them now early and say we will forego fast growth that is determined by the government and fueled by credit and investments, because we realize, we Chinese, we have to move away from that model to make our growth more sustainable. And I think that resonated very well with the Germans.
That's great. How do you think Germany and China can expand cooperating in the field of urbanization? Because Premier Li, he insisted that in Germany, to increase the living quality of the Chinese people in the rural areas is one of their targets for this government. And is there any experience from Germany that China can learn from?
I think China has great challenges because it's such a huge population,
yes.
and the living standards are increasing at such a fast pace, where Germany and other nations had much more time to do that. But I think Germany is very strong in the environmental sector. We have very strict environmental laws and
yes.
technology. We are very good with energy because we don't have much domestic energy, so we are strong in developing alternative energy technologies and things like that. We have a very good social system, which is important in that people spend more money, they save less, so that's good for domestic consumption. That's good for job growth, which is another aspect you need to keep in mind with regard to urbanization. So I think, yes, the exchange of knowledge and experiences can be very valuable for both sides.
What about trading? Do you think the trading between China and Germany are going to increase in the next several years? And do you believe that the partnership between Germany and China are going to set an example for other European countries to have better relations with China like Germany has in order to benefit themselves?
I do think that trade is going to increase and that the relationship is going to become tighter. One thing that the Germans are concerned about medium and longer term is that we have to give up some of our know-how. For instance, to enter the Chinese market, we usually have to enter into joint ventures, and then we have to disclose our technology or trade secrets to a certain extent. And so we are enabling our competitor.
Yes.
I think right now it works, and probably for the next few years, at some point it may become a problem, but that's a little further out. With regard to other European countries, they, in the run-up to the crisis, they have neglected to position themselves and make themselves more competitive with regard to other countries like Asia, where there's cheap labor. So now they're at a distinct disadvantage, and they need to catch up. But hopefully, with the help of Germany and other countries and coordination, they will be able to catch up. But they certainly need to revive their export sectors.
Great. Lastly, how would you forecast the relation between China and Germany in the future?
From all the conversations that I've had, they seem to be very much on the same wavelength. They seem to try to get along, favorably disposed. So I think the outlook is very good, and we look forward to cooperating with China.
Great. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for coming again to our interview.
Thank you for having me, Kevin.
好的，亲爱的观众朋友，以上就是本期的对话华尔街节目，我是陈子纯，我们下周节目再见。